This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you by Ministering to Youth Conference. Imagine for a moment that you are surrounded by mountains next to a peaceful stream in the cool air of the fall. It's hard to imagine a better place. But what if that place was filled with other people who had the same mission that you do? People focused on helping the youth of today live out their faith in Christ. That place is M2Y, the Ministering to Youth Conference, located at the Mainstay Suites in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, on November 4th through the 7th. You will be surrounded by youth ministers, elders, deacons, preachers, youth volunteers, and parents that all have a common goal: ministering to youth. This year, the theme is Renew. The keynote speakers are Dan Chambers and Spencer Furby, along with several other class teachers who will be tackling subjects on mental health, technology, self-care, navigating culture, and so much more. Go to m2yconference.com to register or benandtravis.com/m2y for more information. Travis and I hope to see you there.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. I'm Travis Creasy. Ben Hayes is my normal partner in crime. Unfortunately, Will's not with us today, but I'm sure he'll join us again. We are back in the studio, quotation marks, with a awesome, and I'm going to say young lady, because she'll always be that way to me.
Compared to
LB
us.
Watkins is back with us, and she was a tremendous guest on our previous episode, and so challenge you to go back and listen to that. We obviously want to encourage everybody to subscribe to the podcast, share it where you can, especially with those that might help. And I really believe today, Ben, we've got another great episode in store. How you doing?
I am great, and I feel the same way. We really did enjoy having you, LB, on with us last time, and so thankful that you're on here with us again. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again. This is fun.
Well, we're glad you're having fun. That's a good thing. So, yeah, we're just excited to be here together with you. Last time we talked a little bit about some of the struggles you had early on in life. You had some struggles with learning disability. We talked about those things and how maybe parents can help with that. And then you went into college. You played D1 volleyball as a 4'10", 4'10" individual, and that's amazing. And that takes some tenacity in and of itself. As Travis said, there's some pretty amazing athletes that are, shooting projectiles at your face at 100 miles an hour. So it's a pretty scary place to be. But you did all that in stride, and Shorter University in Georgia has become your home. I guess Shorter's not your home anymore, but Dalton, Georgia now.
Yeah.
But you have, you've been through a lot of those things, and then, of course, married to Tyler Watkins, and you guys now have a family. But I understand that was a little bit of a struggle early on.
Yeah. So like right after we got married, we knew right away that we did want to have kids. And so, right after we got married, he took this position at where we're at now at Christian Heritage. And so moving to a new town, you want to find a doctor and, do all those things that you need to do. And so I went to my doctor early on and kind of told her some issues that I'd been having, and like, hey, we're not really in a rush, but at some point we want to start a family. And so she did some blood work and some tests, and those kind of came back, and it was, hey, you're probably not going to have a very easy journey on this. You have PCOS. You also have some other factors, and fertility is going to be a really struggle for you. And she said, and she's a great doctor, and she's a friend, and I love her. She's still our doctor, but she was like, I would go ahead and start trying now. And so we're like, okay. So we kind of jumped on that, started trying. We had our first miscarriage in 2015, and that ended in a DNC. And then almost a year later, we found out we were pregnant again. And this time we were pregnant with twins. And this is Gunnar and his twin. And through some issues, which we still don't really know why. We lost his twin pretty late. We had actually already announced and everything. We had the go ahead, and so I think that was probably a hard struggle having, to put it out there. And we were so careful, and so after we announced, we had lost his twin, we were under high risk supervision from then probably until almost the end of my pregnancy. And we went on to have Gunnar a healthy, relatively delivery, but he made his appearance. After 20 hours of labor, I had to go into an emergency C-section to get this little baby out. And
wow.
Once we had him, it was great. We're like, okay, I'm fine having one kid, and then 5 months later, it was literally the day after he turned 5 months old, I found out I was pregnant again. Such a miracle within itself, but it was a shock. I was in utter depression. I was still grieving the previous losses of what we experienced and what we went through, and then just panic and anxiety kind of came over, like, oh my gosh, we just went through this. Am I gonna have to go to a doctor's appointment every week? Like, what is this baby gonna be healthy? What's going on? And so when we went to the first doctor's visit, it's funny because I was already 10 weeks along and had no idea. And so I went to school, and a great friend of ours, their names are the LeBoys. Albert LeBoy is a fantastic human being. And we were talking with him, and he's a great prayer warrior for us. And he said, and he was praying over me at that moment. And then after, he just looked at me and said, you know what, LB? He said, God just told me this, that he gave you your twin back with this precious new baby. And that was before we knew that it was Rowan and it was a girl. And he just said, I really think God's moving in your life. He said, I really think this is the opportunity. And so, through doctor's appointments and all that, she was supposed to come late September. And I had a really bad fall in our garage here and went into labor early with Rowan. So, 16 days after Gunnar's first birthday, we had precious Princess Rowan show up with us. And so they're 12 months apart, and we basically treat them like twins anyway. So I think, God's hand was at work with all of this, giving us our completed family at this point, and just seeing them grow is wonderful. There's such joys. Do they drive me crazy sometimes? Yes, but all in all, finally getting to see God's hand and His whole complete vision for us was really cool to kind of witness that. But man, infertility is a huge struggle, and I really feel like it is talked about a little bit more, but it's still not something that people really dive into or really even know how to dive into or even talk to other people about. It's kind of like when you lose a parent or someone dies, the people that lost someone feel like people not necessarily exclude them, but people don't know how to respond or react, and so I feel like people just kind of shut off and don't talk about it because they don't want to upset anyone talking about it. But I feel like I've always been somewhat open just because I don't want people to go through those struggles alone, and I want to be able to answer questions as best as I can and help those people in times of grief, because it's hard grieving for someone that you've never met, that you prayed for, that you've wanted. We lost 3, so we've had 3 losses, but it's definitely an emotional but a spiritual roller coaster too, because there are times where you're mad at God. Why are you doing this? Why is this in your plan for me? I'm not capable of handling this. I
got 2 things on that, and it goes into what you're saying. First of all, I think of like my grandparents' age. I know that my grandma Creasy on my dad's side, they they lost a child, and I think it was actually after it had been born. But I just think about how many of those people for
Right.
generations that have dealt with that grief without any way of really
Mhm.
expressing that, and not even having the stuff that we have today. And I agree completely. I mean, it's just something that is uncomfortable, so therefore we stay away from it. But we have a God who
Right.
invites our vulnerability. And I
Mhm.
think the second thing is going back to your prayer warrior you were talking about. What was that like to have someone like that in this time of need? Because I think, man, that's such a big deal that somebody would know what you guys are going through and care enough to be involved at
Yeah,
that level.
I think it was just comforting because at times I didn't feel like I had the strength to pray or even wanted to pray or even be near God because I was angry. I was
Sure.
upset. I was mad, and it was just like, well, how can I even talk to you at this point? But it was really good knowing that I had those prayer people around me, praying for me, uplifting me, kind of pulling me out of these dark times without necessarily saying, "Hey, you're in this dark path. Let's get out. Everything's going to be better. God has a plan." Sometimes you don't want to hear that. Sometimes you kind of want to revel in your sadness and grief, and people deal with grief differently. Um, and and for me, I was not necessarily super open at the time, but I wasn't completely shut off. It was just kind of, I'm not going to deal with it today. But as people prayed for me more and more, or they would just come up, "Hey, how you doing today?" Kind of just little things like that. Didn't want to, they didn't need a long answer. It was just, "I'm okay today," or "I'm not good today, but I'm here." And to know that they were going back and then praying, for me, kind of helped me pull me out of those dark days. And especially, Mr. LeBoy, even now, he'll just come up and we work together, which is fun too. But, he'll just say, "Hey, I just really felt in my heart I needed to pray for you today. And I just want you to know, I'm praying for you. Is there anything specific?" And just to have someone who's really, in tune with people like that to be a prayer person is phenomenal. Like, I struggle with being a super good prayer warrior just because I'm I don't like to pray, out loud at the dinner table with my own family. And so just to kind of get real vulnerable with God and pray for other people when it's hard enough to pray for myself is hard. So having someone to do that for you and to kind of help you work through some of those things, it's wonderful. It's freeing almost, because you can almost, let them help you get closer to God by their prayers for you, if that makes sense.
We've talked with several people. I think all of us have gone through grief in different levels. And something that you said a while ago, and I know we talked about last time, you're a photographer. You kind of see things differently than everybody, especially just the way you see pictures, I guess. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about a lot of times when people are in grief, you've got a lot of, if you thought about people being down in a hole or down in a in a
Hmm.
pit of some sort. And there's some people who want to stay outside that pit and go, "Come on, come back to the light, come back up here."
Right.
And it's like, you're not ready. You don't want to
Yeah.
come out of that. You kind of want to be in that hole. And the people that make the biggest difference, I feel like, are the people who climb down in the hole with you. I'm
Yeah.
going to come down there. I'm going to sit with you where you're at. I'm going to be in the dark with you.
Hmm.
And then over time, we'll start walking out of the hole together. So many times people are just uncomfortable with the dark part of it, uncomfortable with being angry with God. And I've
Hmm.
always said God's big enough to handle
Yeah.
our anger. He gave it to us. So,
Hmm.
he's able to handle that.
Family devotional time. Fulfilling, organized, fun. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Moses' words in Deuteronomy 6:4-8 to the children of Israel in the speech that closed out not only his ministry, but also his life, can be overwhelming at times and make us as parents feel like we could be doing more to disciple our children. In the fast-paced life that we live,
We're usually just happy if everyone makes it out the door with their shoes on the correct feet. Planning and executing a family devotional time can seem out of reach. We're here to help. The Helping Healing Humor podcast has a tool to help you plan, organize, and execute a fulfilling and fun family devotional time for every member of your family, from toddler to teen. As a member of the Ben and Travis Patreon community, you will have access to tons of content at a small price that will help you grow your spiritual life, disciple your family, or even lead a small group Bible study. Patreon membership fees will help our podcast continue to be better and support the cost of creating and publishing the content that our Helping Healing Humor community has enjoyed. Go to www.patreon.com/Ben and Travis to sign up. Hit the link in the show notes for this month's special offer.
We mentioned last time you are the daughter of Lonnie Jones, and of course, if he's ever been protective of you, I know he is about 100 times more protective of Gunnar and Rowan, and he loves those kids dearly, and just revels in the fact that he's got those grandbabies now. So
yes.
But that was also a struggle that we talked about. Your dad had a health scare. And where was the time frame on it? And
I was a sophomore in college, so I had just transferred from Troy over to Shorter, and it was in January. So I wasn't quite through with. We had just started second semester, really. And I got a phone call from my mom in the middle. I think it was 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, which is very abnormal to receive a phone call, because she's a full-time school teacher, and you don't call mom unless there's an emergency, and she sure as heck does not call you until 4 or 5 o'clock. And I'm in Georgia, so the time difference, I'm already an hour ahead. So it was like, what? Maybe this is a butt dial. And I almost didn't answer it. And I was sitting in an art lectureship. And so I remember looking at my phone, I'm like, oh, I might need to take this. So I walk out of the dark room, because, he's presenting slides on art something. I don't even know at this point. And I walk out and I was like, hey, what, Mom? Did you mean to call? And she's like, so, which is crazy because, y'all know Mom. She's pretty even keel. She doesn't really get worked up. But for something like this, she was scary chill. It was, hey, your dad has had an accident. I'm not sure that he's going to live. He's in Anniston. You probably need to go and have your last words with him, and you need to get there as quickly as possible. I'm trying to find a sub, and I'll be there as quickly as I can. I may not make it. I love you, but I've got to go. And that was it. Like, I had no other point of reference, nothing. I just remember I was just like, that's a lot to process. I didn't even get to ask, wait a minute, what happened? What's going on? It was just, I love you, goodbye. You got to get there. He's in Anniston, and didn't even know that my grandparents were there, but they were there. But Anniston triggered that because that's where my dad's from. And so I ran out of class, get in my car. I'm driving to my dorm, trying to get all my stuff packed. And I ran into a teammate, and her name's Katie, and we're great friends still to this day. I love her. She's from California, doesn't have a car at this time, doesn't really drive very well, but sees that I'm in a lot of distress. And she's like, hey, and my volleyball team called me Beezy. And she was like, Beezy, what's going on? How can I help? And I'm like, I don't really know. I just know that I need to go try to make it to see my dad. He may not make it. And she's like, well, let me drive you. And I'm like, Katie, you don't even have a license. Like, can you drive me? And she's like, at this point, we'll figure it out. Just get your GPS on. You don't need to drive. You don't need to be alone. Let's go. And so, we hopped in the car, and she took me, and we did make it. And thankfully he did survive, but, his colon exploded, for those who don't know. And he was supposed to be hunting that morning. And I truly believe that if he was hunting, it would be a whole different ball game right now. But he decided to go ahead and go on to Anniston, and he stopped at this little gun shop. Of course, he did stop at a gun shop. And that's when it kind of happened. But he drove himself to the hospital. And the little old ladies there were just like, if you can spell your name, you know, we're going to take you back. You look that bad. And so I just think, you know, God's hand over everybody that day was great. But even in that was really hard for me. And, you know, early adulthood, I think I was probably 19 at the time. So still in my teens. And that was a huge burden, I felt like, for me to take on with God, because it was like, why are you doing this to my dad? He's a great man. He helps so many people. Why would you potentially take him from us? And for a long time, probably until I met Tyler, so probably almost 2 years until I met Tyler, because I met him at the end of my junior year. From that time, I was in a very dark place. It was very hard for me to be positive, to look at the bright outcome. It was really hard for me to be in the same room and people would come in and pray over my dad. And I would just kind of like remember, I was probably so incredibly rude, and I feel terrible about that now, but I just remember just laughing out loud, like, what, you're praying to this guy? Like, why? Look what he did, you know? And I would just like storm out of the hospital room and just kind of I cannot be in here. I can't do this. I'm not able to handle this right now. And Katie, of all people, wise beyond her years at that point too. And I think she was probably in a faith struggle as well during that time. And we have completely different backgrounds. We were sitting outside one night talking, outside of someone's house. They were having a party or something. And we were just sitting outside, and there was a basketball court. And she was asking me, you know, some really deep questions about, you know, my dad and God, and, you know, why, like, maybe God didn't do this. You know, people have things that happen to them and it's not God, and was really testing my faith, and, you know, at that point. And we were sitting there, and something along the lines of, I just said, well, if God's real, he would do something, and he would show us right now. Like, we were kind of in that kind of talk where it was just like, you know, at that point I was just like, he doesn't exist. There's no way. This is not possible. Like, if he was really real, he'll do this at this exact moment. And what was crazy, it was a perfect night sky. You could see every star out there. And out of nowhere, the thunder and lightning that struck around us was, I'm talking about it now. And I don't actually even think my dad knows this story either, but I get emotional because it was like, I remember her and I just looking at each other, and we're like, okay, we get it. Okay. And then at that very moment, she just started to pray for us, and it never rained. Beautiful sky, and the thunder and lightning that shook around us was just an awe moment of, okay, he's got this. Why did I ever doubt? Why did I ever struggle? He is great. He is powerful. And so I think that's kind of a cool story. So from that moment leading into infertility, I think that's how I had yes, I was still angry, but I think I had a bigger picture and a bigger understanding of God at that point, when it got to that point in my life, to know, hey, even in our darkest times, even when I'm publicly renouncing you at this moment, you're still there, and you're still wanting, and you're still fighting for me. And I think that really helped me, and Tyler and all of us during those times know that God is so much bigger than we really know.
Yeah, I've been studying the book of Job a little bit off and on, because it's not my favorite. I'd say Ecclesiastes is my least favorite book. I'm just repenting. And then Job, you know, because a lot of times with Job, it's almost like you leave with more questions than answers. But the more I read, like Job 1, you know, Satan, you know, or God says, have you considered Job? And he lists all these great characteristics about Job.
Right.
And then all this terrible stuff happens. And at the end of the book, there's Job still with all that list of things, like this is the finest man, he's blameless, he's upright. And it's like God tells Satan before he even tries, hey, this is how this is going to end. He's upright, he's blameless. And so it's almost like when those things happen, it really reveals what God already knows. It's like, he can handle this. I've got this. And even if he can, I've still got it, And so that was the first thing that popped in my mind when you were talking about your questioning, because Job is upright and he's blameless, or however the language is there in whatever version you read, but he asks the questions. He even says, even if he kills me, even if God takes my life, I will still ask the questions. It goes back to what Ben was saying. Nothing we deal with, our anger, our emotions, are bigger than God is, and he can handle those things. And so, man, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, when I think about Hebrews, the end of Hebrews 11 with the faith, and I've mentioned this on several occasions, probably mentioned on the podcast, but a lot of times we think of faith getting us through and everybody winning the battle, David and Goliath and, Joshua and Jericho. And we forget that, at the end of Hebrews 11, there's a lot of people who don't come out physically victorious. There are people who die. There are people who have losses. There are people who go through a lot of things. And faithfulness is not defined by us winning physically. Faithfulness is defined by us staying faithful regardless of what happens. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If I die, then so be it. But we're not going to serve your gods. So I think God, that's part of. Doesn't mean we can't question. Job questioned, Abraham questioned, David questioned, everybody that we see. I think God invites us to question, because when we question, we go deeper. When we question our faith, you mentioned that you don't know how much your faith has changed, but that it's grown deeper as you have, as you've experienced difficult things. It's gotten deeper in your faith towards God. So, what are some things that you might recommend to people who are listening right now, whether it's infertility, whether it's, because we've swung from your own kids, the things that have happened to your kids, which is a terrible and difficult thing to go through, but also it's hard to watch your parents go through things, and health concerns. And I've got some experience with that now too. And so, what would you give to people on any part of that spectrum? Or there's a lot of people who are dealing with things with kids and parents at the same time. What would you say?
Back to your point, it's okay to question, and it's okay. I've always felt, and this could be wrong, but I've always, it's okay to be upset, but don't get sucked into it to where you can't get out. Because I almost got too deep where I couldn't get out. And I think you have to have a support system around you, whether it be one person, two people. You just have to have people around you checking in on you, who are genuine about checking in on you and knowing what you're going through. Don't be afraid to open up and say, I'm mad. I hate God at this point, or I'm frustrated at this. Don't hold that back. Don't be scared that they're going to judge you on that. Let them help you through that by praying for you. Or, through my miscarriages, I had a group of moms who kind of went through the same thing as well. And just sometimes it would just be a random day and a text would pop up with a scripture that was just kind of like, oh, that hit home today. Thank you. And there doesn't need to be an explanation. You don't have to have an hour conversation with somebody. It can just literally be a simple text. Hey, thinking of you today. That's it. And if they don't respond, that's fine. If they respond, great. But you don't have to overthink it and think, I have to have all the answers at this point. Sometimes you just need to sit and listen. Even if you have nothing to say at all, just sitting and listening is sometimes kind of the biggest healing for anybody, because it allows them to kind of say some things and process and kind of work through themselves without having any back and forth.
My tendency, I'll repent myself here, is to get through the dark as quickly as you possibly can. Let's get through it. And I know counselor
Yeah.
sitting over there is probably like, don't do that, right? And so I want to rush everything, and I'm the one like, let's get out of this hole. Let's just get out of this hole. And so then it turns around to people I love and care for, my
Right.
wife or my kids. Let's get out of that hole. Everything's okay. Everything's fine. Let's move on. And, how many lessons do we miss in that? How much of our relationship with God grows from that? So, I'll just take your challenge and tell whoever's listening to this right now, text that person right now.
Yeah.
Stop it. You can listen to the podcast and text at the same time. Don't do it while you drive. But send that text, send that email right now. If someone, we all know somebody who's going through something. And so,
if you try to climb out of that hole too quickly, you find that you drag the hole with you. So, you're taking it everywhere you go instead of sort of processing all the emotions. And that's one of the things they recommend with grief or anything like that you go through is let those emotions all be experienced. And, when you can experience the anger and the sadness and the happy stuff and the good stuff and, everything.
As per tradition, we will end on a light note. If there's a song, so you're riding down the road, you may have somebody with you, you may not, but it comes on. You're going to reach down there, you're going to turn the radio up. You might roll down the window. I don't know.
I definitely think my go-to, let's scream at the top of our lungs, would be Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, that is my all-time favorite. Like, let's go, and you sing every chorus, every line. Like, when I play it in the car, my kids just look at me. They're like, what is wrong with her? Like, I love it.
Those are the best ones.
I can't get enough of it.
I love it too.
I think we could do those parts right here, right? We're kind of set up like the music video.
Sure. For sure. We gotta get the Freddie Mercury microphone. We gotta do all of it.
We're thankful for you and all of y'all's many talents. Like, it just, just phenomenal amount of talent, from the photography to just the way y'all's minds work and you see things, and even the non-filter, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've laughed about the non-filter stories. But thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for sharing with our audience. And
you're welcome.
We're thankful for God's blessings on y'all, and we'll continue to pray for those to continue.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. Until next time, look for us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.